Do a Bodhidharma face.
There's an old Zen master would say, "Shall I put a twinkle in my eye?"
Hey, 3, 2.
Good evening and welcome to ZENtalk. This is January 3rd. We have been doing this for about a month now, and we try to feature the current aspects about the assimilation of Zen into the American culture. And this is starting a new year, 2019. Tonight we have Tom Stockman as our guest. He's a young man who is an artist and has a day job as a butcher, and is a recent resident at the Atlanta Soto Zen Center. This is ZENtalk, and you can send your questions in, or if you think you would like to be on the show as an interviewee sometime, contact us through www.asec.org, and we will see if we can schedule you for one of our Thursday evenings. Every Thursday evening, with some exceptions, we are broadcasting on YouTube. I think the sound goes on Mixlr and the Facebook page. So for the Atlanta Soto Zen Center. So tonight we will be continuing with our series around Zen in America. That is, Zen, has a lot of misconceptions, a lot of ideas about where it came from. And we are a lay practice community. We think Zen is for everyone, although not everyone may be ready for Zen. But we like to interview our members of the Atlanta Soto Zen Center, and we have about 24, couple dozen affiliates around the country, USA and in Canada. So from time to time, we have guests coming in from out of town. We like to interview them about why they do Zen in the first place and why they keep coming back to it in the second place, maybe. So we think there are a lot of misconceptions, misunderstandings about Zen out there, and we think the simplest way to clarify that is simply to have real people who are practicing Zen talk about their practice. So tonight, Tom, we'd like to start with you and just say, what brought you to Zen. Give us a little of your background, where you came from, your education, and so on, and what first brought you to Zen practice here.
Okay. Well, first I do have to correct you because I'm not a butcher. I'm a butcher's assistant.
Oh.
And my butcher would if he ever saw this, he'd be like, "You're not a butcher." Like,
Sort of like Zen.
Yeah.
Zen teacher.
I'm not allowed to pick up the knife. I just weigh things.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And yeah, things like that.
Good point of clarification. Glad you clarified that.
I just don't know if he's going to see this. I first came to the Zen Center, this center in the same building and everything, in about 2006 or 2007 when I was in high school. And I just came here for a little bit, maybe 6 months. I was coming here pretty regularly, and you said that you remembered me. And then I moved away, and I spent the next 10 years mostly in Milledgeville, Georgia, where I got a history degree. And then in the middle of that, I went to China. I got a master's degree in philosophy, and I've just had a crazy 10 years. And I got back to Atlanta, and I was just like, I don't know. I was just all out of sorts. And I was like, I'm going to go back to where I found peace 10 years ago. And
wow, that's bachelor's in history.
Yeah.
In Georgia, and a master's in philosophy in China.
Mm-hmm. And that's the only two places I've ever lived.
That's a little extreme.
Yeah, and I've never been to Europe. It's weird to move into Asia. Like, I've been in Georgia my whole life, and it's weird because you never leave, and then you just feel like the whole world doesn't exist and you can't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. And then I went to China, and now it feels like I could go anywhere in Asia. But I think about Europe, and I'm still like, that place doesn't exist. I could never go to Europe.
Yeah.
And that's
Did you pick up any of the language while you were in China?
Median.
A little bit.
Yeah.
How old are you now?
I'm 29.
29.
My spoken Chinese is really bad, and my listening is really bad in every language. But I can read classical Chinese, a little bit, which is a weird skill to have. Yeah, so I like to talk about the Tao Te Ching and about the Chinese and of the Tao Te Ching.
Can you tell us a little bit the Tao Te Ching, what it is, for the sake of our
Okay,
viewers who
yeah,
don't know what it is?
The Tao Te Ching is one of the central texts of what they call philosophical Taoism, which is there's a small little collection of writings that came out of China in the period of time called the Warring States period, which is after the fall of the Zhou dynasty, I think in the 500s or 600s, and then before the reunification of China in the 200s BC. And this little body of literature dealt with abstract concepts about the nature and potentials of language and how to like rule the state, but as opposed to other philosophical texts that were coming out of China that were dealing with like the real practical matters of how to rule the state by how to teach your people how to go to war better, or teaching people how to like operate within a family system and how to aspire to noble virtues better. The Taoist texts were sort of advocating a return to an imitation of nature in a lot of ways.
So how does that compare to Confucianism, which sounds like what you were talking about?
So it's funny, in China, like a lot of things that you'll hear is that people sort of hold both in their lives. Like they have Confucianism when they go to work, and then Taoism when they come home from work.
Okay.
You know, because like it's like Confucianism is all about the family structure and your structure within your society and your structure in your business and your relationship with your political order, and then Taoism is sort of about the soul and it's more meditative and has more in common with Buddhism and but in China they don't really discard either one of the two. You know, they
don't really do what?
They don't really discard either one.
Discard either one. There's a Chinese poem, Xin Ming, I think, toward the end it says, "Ministers serve their lords, children obey their parents. Not obeying is not failure. Failure to serve is no help."
Oh, that's Confucianism.
That's Confucianism.
Yeah,
Gotta be, right?
That's some Confucianism.
But then it goes on to say, "With practice hidden, function secretly like a fool, like an idiot. Just to continue in this way is called the host within the host." This is Chinese Buddhism.
Oh, yeah.
So it's taking it to a very
Yeah,
personal
you
level.
can see all of them in one. Yeah. There's somebody told me that there's a saying in China, and I can't remember if it's which order it goes, because it says you're born a Confucian and you die a Buddhist, and it's a little joke about how their birth ritual is a Confucian ritual and then their funeral ritual is a Buddhist ritual. But you know, and it might be the opposite. I can't remember.
No, that sounds.
Yeah, that sounds right. But it's, you know, I think that the funeral ritual is I don't know. But you know, it really holds true that because they have three predominant religions in China, you know, or they did for thousands of years. You know, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, and people, even if you weren't a practicing Buddhist, you would study Buddhism, or you would know of it, and it would influence your life in some way.
But Buddhism came late to the party, right? We attribute spread of Buddhism to China to Bodhidharma, who is the 28th patriarch in India, who was Indian. And somewhere in the late 400s, early 500s, somewhere variously dated around 528, something like that, supposedly he went to China and brought the direct practice of meditation as what we understand to be Zen. And in China, it became Chan. Chan is phonetic for jhana. Jhana is an Indian term meaning contemplation or meditation. Chan. And so Zen is phonetic for Chan. So what we now call Zen, or Zen Buddhism, Zen meditation, and so forth, is actually a phonetic description of Chinese meditation. And Master Dogen, who founded our sect, 13th century Japan, traveled to China when he was a little younger than you. He was in about 25, I think, and brought this style of practice, now called Soto, after Tozan and Sozan or Dongshan, and his successor in China, for sometimes called quiet illumination meditation. Could be a little bit of a pejorative, like quietism. Brought that back from China. So the practice that we do actually, although it comes to us from Japan, it's a Chinese form of practice. But tell me a little bit about your perspective on Buddhism coming to China, Taoism, Confucianism, and probably all kinds of indigenous religions were already there. And what do you expect was the impact of Bodhidharma's bringing Zen to China on the culture?
Well, so I think about this a lot, actually. My specialty was in 3rd century AD, so I didn't focus too heavily on the Buddhism in China, but I've still thought about it, so I do have thoughts on it. Because you can see the impact that China had on Buddhism, and on because when China comes into Buddhism, it's sort of the height of what they call the Xuan Shua, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, period of Chinese academia, where Taoism is sort of come into resurgence, and there's so Shua means study, and then Xuan means like mysterious or dark.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the study of the mysterious
Mm-hmm.
is sort of blossoming in China when Buddhism shows up, and there's a big focus on nothingness, Wu, and that had not been sort of the central focus of Chinese thought for hundreds of years before that. Like during the Han Dynasty, from the 200s BC up until the 200s AD, nothingness had sort of fallen out of favor, in favor of sort of alchemic practices to achieve eternal life and things like that. But then this sort of this interest in the nothingness at the center of everything really it becomes central, and then that's when Buddhism arrives. And so I don't know too much about Indian Buddhism, but I know that with the Buddhism that I've always been familiar with, the idea of nothingness has always been sort of there, and so I always wonder how China impacted that.
The stories of Bodhidharma are interesting. He apocryphal as far as we know, but there's a record of his being at Shaolin Temple in China, in Japanese known as Shorinji. This strange monk from India reputedly had red hair and blue eyes, which even for India is strange. So he must have caused quite a stir coming to China. But his initial meeting with Emperor Wu, not the same Wu, not the emptiness Wu, Emperor Wu, was a very famous exchange, at least according to the story. And it went something like the emperor said, I've established so many monasteries throughout China. And I guess Buddhist monasteries, because Buddhism was in China before Bodhidharma showed up. Mm-hmm. There was a famous Chinese monk whose name I can't recall, who was said to be a genuine transmitted Zen priest or monk in China. He was Chinese. So Bodhidharma comes, he meets in the south of China, Emperor Wu, and has this conversation with him. And so he asked Bodhidharma, how much merit have I accumulated by doing this? And the story goes, Bodhidharma said, no merit. We don't think or know that he said, you have accumulated no merit. He just said, no merit. So you can interpret these a lot of different ways. So the emperor was a little put off by this, as you can imagine. And he asked Bodhidharma something like, who is it that appears before me? And Bodhidharma said, don't know. So if you try to interpret those literally, they sound, it kind of trivializes them, I think. But if you take Bodhidharma's message to say no merit, he's saying there is no such merit to be accumulated, no matter what you do, no matter how many temples you establish, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the way you accumulate merit and so forth. And even the whole idea of accumulating merit is kind of a false narrative in Zen. And then when he says, who is it that is standing before me? And he says, don't know. You would interpret that literally to say, well, he doesn't know who he is, or he's saying, even though he knows who he is, he's saying, I don't really know what that is. But I think from a Zen perspective, we would take this as being the don't know mind. The Bodhidharma is manifesting the don't know mind. The one that does not actually know is the true one. The one that thinks he or she knows something is confused. So it's a wonderful kind of exchange, and apparently Bodhidharma decided that that part of China at that time was not ready. This emperor was not ready to hear, because the emperor didn't understand this conversation. So he moved on to Shaolin Temple, where apparently he stayed for some 9 years, and so forth.
That reminds me when I first came in here, my first interview with you, I was talking about my past and how I wanted to try to take this opportunity to become a better person and work on my moral character. And you said something to me about how, you can't make up for anything. Like, it's all now, like there's no, like, that's it. That's not how karma works. That's what you said.
Yeah. But it doesn't deny the 3 times. It doesn't deny karmic consequence in the 3 times. It says that for you to want to be a better person is kind of a fantasy. If we can accept our behavior and accept the consequences of our behavior, in a way, that's the most we can do. Ideals such as becoming a better person, I think that's a little bit new agey interpretation of Zen. I think Zen is more about waking up to what we already are, to what really is, rather than us trying to take control and trying to make something different, make us different, but to discover our original nature, our true nature, as it is, with all of its faults, with all of our faults included.
It's hard though. You really want to be a better person, even when you're trying to let go of it.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
So what are your aspirations for your practice, would you say?
I'm not sure.
Other than being a better person.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like I got really good at meditating out in the world, out in the chaos of everything, and it wasn't that good for me. So I was like, maybe I should try meditating in the quiet room that you guys have.
Well, there's some concern that people raise. Is my meditation just allowing me to accept things as they are and being complacent or satisfied with things as they are, and therefore not really a good thing? Shouldn't my meditation have a cutting edge of some sort? Shouldn't it be helping me to get somewhere? Question is, where do you want to get?
I feel like it's just stopping me. Like sometimes I just need to be stopped, like it's like I don't need to be able to actualize every thought in my head. So maybe I just need to stare at the wall and just let them go,
So as an artist, a young man, you have a very busy mind.
Oh yeah, it never ever stops. Yeah.
And a lot of people misunderstand Zen meditation as being stopping the mind, stopping thoughts, and so forth. We don't really teach that. My best understanding is if you try to stop the mind, we call monkey mind. Monkey mind is like a monkey jumping from limb to limb of the tree, always looking for something interesting. If you try to resist this chatter, this monkey mind chatter that's going on, it only becomes stronger. So it becomes like this 600-pound gorilla, and you'll lose that fight. So it's more a matter, from our perspective, I think, of listening to it. the mind has some wisdom. We think it's survival oriented. We think it's in a way, our best friend. But like a kitten or a puppy dog, a monkey has limitations. And so in our Zen meditation, I think what we do is let it sort of run its tether out, like a kitten or a puppy dog. Pretty soon it'll wear itself out, get tired, lie down, take a nap. That's called chitta, discriminating thinking mind. And as an artist, you have surely experienced another part of your mind, which is more intuitive, right? You don't, I suppose, I'm assuming, you don't think your way through your art, right?
No, it's like I'm like engraving my vision. It's just I don't even know what I'm doing most of the time.
Yeah, so it's a more intuitive level.
Mm-hmm.
Vision is an interesting word. From a design and art background, musical background, somewhat musical background. Thought is not necessarily in words. Thought is not necessarily even in concepts that you could identify as such. But thought can be in sound. If you think of what a composer does musically, I don't know how classical composers work really, but they must be hearing something, right? They must be hearing it. And so maybe they hear it as a voice of an instrument, the clarinet, the reed section, or the drum section, or the string section, or something in a classical orchestra. I have no idea. But you have to imagine that they must be hearing these ideas. So the ideas exist in sound, not so much as thought in, say, words or language. The St. Paul said, words, the way is beyond language. The way, great way, is beyond language. For in it, there's no yesterday, no tomorrow, no today. So I think as an artist, you begin to experience some other level of, you could call it thought, but it isn't really in words. It's not really in language. It's in images or visions, right?
I remember when I first told you I was an artist, you said I told you I was a painter, and you asked me what kind of paintings I did, and you said, "Do you do abstracts?" And I said, "No, I'm like Van Gogh." And then you said, "Oh, so you're trying to grab hold of reality?" And it just shocked me that you came up with that so quickly. I was like, "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing," but I never thought about it like that.
You look at Van Gogh's painting, you can tell he's trying to catch up with reality. He was somewhat, I don't think he was schizophrenic.
No, I think he was like me. I think that I've got the same.
Yeah, I don't know if he was diagnosed in any such way. But if you look at the art of schizophrenics, they have a similar kind of atomization and a granular disintegration. Like there was a wonderful book published on the art of schizophrenics that showed the progress of several different ones. I don't know if they were all in the same place or if the author just went around and collected these, but they had all the images. And you could see a progressive kind of deterioration from the first painting to the next one, to the next, to the next. And that's the impression I got from looking at Van Gogh. It's like a psychedelic drug experience or something. It's moving rapidly, and he's trying to capture it with paint, trying to capture a snapshot of what he's actually seeing. That's what it looks like to me.
That's what it feels like when I do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had some experience with drugs back in the 60s. Everybody in the 60s in Chicago, my students at the Art Institute, my students at the University of Illinois, they'd often come in on a bad trip. I talk them down, help them, with their. Most of the bad trips on psychedelic drugs were based on fear. They were based on some sort of fear of what demons or whatever they were experiencing. In Zen, we have these wonderful analogies or structures by which we can have out of your mind kind of experiences where you see visions and see dragons in the wall and stuff like that. But the metaphors are there in Zen to encourage you to think this is not abnormal. This is coming from somewhere. This is real. And so I think Zen is a healthy palliative for those kinds of neuroses, if you want to call them that.
And painting helps too.
And what?
Painting helps too.
Painting, I think, is a good way of
Yeah.
relating to it.
Yeah, because Van Gogh obviously had so much fear, but I read a letter he wrote once where he said, all I want to do with my paintings is just show everybody how much I love everything.
Yeah, yeah. They're
Yes.
very warm and embracing the colors. The blue room, there was one, this room we stayed in was all blue. It was beautiful. Those of us who had some transsensory kind of experiences, either through drugs or through meditation, can relate to what he was doing. But if you look at the Impressionists, they're like that too. That's when it was discovered that light was photons, and so the color you're seeing is actually particulate, you know. And they started showing in the shadows, you'd see these brilliant colors coming through the shadows of the air of the painting. Monet's water lilies. I happened to see those at the Museum of the High Museum here in Atlanta. I had no idea the size and scale of them. They're like
Oh, yeah.
12, 15 feet high and 25 feet long or something. I'd seen them in books, you know, but I
Yeah.
never looked at the size. But when I walked into the room, it was stunning. It was just stunning.
Yeah, because you picture the Impressionists like the great masters with these tiny little paintings, but you know, the Van Gogh sunflowers are huge too.
Are they?
Yeah.
Yeah. They had a beautiful exhibit of those Van Gogh's work in particular at the Art Institute last time I was in Chicago.
I've never seen a Van Gogh. I think I would just start crying if I saw Van Gogh.
Yeah, quite impressive. So where do you see your future going with Zen and art and fill in the blank?
I have no idea. I feel like I'm at a new place in my life. As of just a couple months ago, I had all these. They felt like visions, but it was really just I was just being able to think over my life in a way I never thought of before. And I made this conscious decision to choose a completely different way than I had ever lived before. You know, I used to go to sleep with rap music just blaring as loud as I could every night because I just loved noise. And I was like, I'm going to try the opposite of all of the really loud things I've been doing.
How's that working out for you?
I don't know. It's like hard to I feel like it actually, I feel stripped of all of my coping mechanisms. So I actually feel more vulnerable than ever in a lot of ways.
Which is not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's you know, and this is a good place to be vulnerable, I guess.
Yeah. We think in Zen, those areas are worth exploring. For instance, just between waking and sleeping, the dividing line. We woke up this morning, right? We know the difference. Buddhism's proposition, I think, is very simple. We're still asleep. We can wake up from this, and we will know the difference just as much as we know the difference from waking up this morning. So sometimes in your longer meditation retreats, you start crossing that line back and forth. Sometimes you'll slip into a dream. You're sitting there in meditation, and all of a sudden you're back in the zendo, but the dream is still going on. So I think the artist is exploring these realms. The artist is looking into kind of what is the reality, and that's, I think, the focus of Zen is what is this reality? We assume we know it, right? And we tend to ignore a lot of things that sort of go against maybe what we think we know. So when you paint, what do you paint? Do you paint the room you're in? Do you paint
I always paint just what's in front of me.
just what's there? in the
Yeah,
environment?
I actually I thought for a long time that because I didn't start painting until I was 27, and that's the same age that Van Gogh started painting, and I have I can't paint anything from my imagination, and neither could he. So I thought maybe that's just something that happens if you start painting really late. And I think I just figured out actually what's wrong with both of us is that neither of us are any good at doing contour lines. Like Van Gogh never used like where you draw just an object in a single line.
Right.
You know, just for people who don't know, he never did a contour line in his life, and I'm not good at them. And if you take a drawing class, that's the first thing they teach you.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, oh, maybe. Obviously, I can't draw something in my mind if I can't even draw it if I'm looking at it. You know, I use all these tiny little hash marks like Van Gogh would.
Yeah.
But right now, I can only draw what's in front of me. So that's what I do.
He's Van Gogh, you could say he's painting the surface. He's painting the surfaces, painting the textures, right? And they end up generating their forms. But the way we're taught art is a little bit the way we're taught Zen. It's kind of like, here's the way we can teach it, right? That doesn't mean that that's the way it is. So Mondrian is a good example. When Mondrian, in his early works, did you ever try to draw or paint a tree?
I love painting. Yeah, but I do it with a bunch of little hash marks.
Right, right.
Yeah.
The natural tendency is to start with a tree and try to draw all the branches and it just gets to be, beyond. And it's very difficult, very complex. What Mondrian did is he drew the empty spaces between the branches. So if you look at those early drawings of trees, they're just beautiful, but you can tell he sees this shape as kind of a diamond or triangle type shape, and it turns out that that's defined by the trunk and a couple of branches. But he looked at what is called the negative space. That's what he focused on, which keeps you from getting lost in the incredibly complex winnowing of the branches and stuff. So I think Zen and art are like that too. Master Dogen had this expression, take the backward step, turn the light back on yourself. And in art, I think it's a little bit like that. Drawing, photography, painting, they're all training the eye to actually see what we're seeing. I think that's redundant, as if of course we're seeing what we're seeing. Not really. When you start doing the hand-eye coordination, contour drawing is sometimes taught where you don't even look at the paper.
Yeah.
You've done that, right? You look at the person's face and
it's fun. Yeah.
Ant crawling across there and you're following the ant, right? And eventually you look down at the paper and it's all these lines going everywhere, but it still captures, some impression of that which you're drawing. Training the eye,
Yeah, I always tell people, because my friends are like, why do you feel like you're a good artist after just started? You started a couple of years ago, and I think I am a good artist, but I said that I didn't need to know anything about art because I'm just looking at the paintings. That's all you got to do is just look at them and just will them into being good, and just don't walk away until they're good.
Don't give up.
Yeah, it's about looking for something. It's just about seeing.
So, how are we doing on time? So where do you see yourself going now?
I don't know. I think about it. I think
you're pretty young to be thinking about it. We're kind of forced to in this culture.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'll be here for, who knows? I don't know how long I'll be here.
You mean at the Zen Center?
At the Zen Center, yeah.
But where do you see yourself going in terms of your painting?
Oh, I don't know. It's weird because I want to be humble, but I'm inside. I'm not. So if I really have to be honest about that, I gotta be like, look, I'm gonna get famous. It's gonna work out. Like, I got big plans.
I think that's good.
Yeah, but
I'm not humble about my work at all. You know my work, and I don't take credit for all of it because it's earth, wind, fire, water, all the fundamental forces working. So I have a rabbi neighbor, an Orthodox rabbi, lives next door to me, and I was working on the patio one time. He was out on his back porch, and he said, "What are you doing? Painting?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm painting." And he said, "Oh, that's interesting." I said, "Wait a minute." I went in and got a piece and brought it out. That piece over there, actually. Brought it out, and I showed it to him, and I explained to him a little bit about how I work. And he said, "Oh, you let God paint for you." He said, "Well, you could say that. You're a rabbi. You can say that. I wouldn't say that necessarily." Yeah. So in my case, I can say I think this is a minor masterpiece because I'm not really 100% responsible for its creation. It's letting the medium do the talking kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like you're letting the paint do it.
Yeah. Letting the material actually make the image. Yeah. To a degree, you have to step in and take over when it starts to go awry. I would like to see your painting. I'd like to see what you're doing. Are you still planning to continue to work while you're staying here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest reasons I'm here is that I want a space where I can just come and work and there's no distractions, so that because I work a full-time job, but I want to live the life. I want to work as an artist, and I'm like, I can't do that if I get home and I'm tired, so I just watch TV. I need to get home and have nothing else to do. So I can either sit in the Zendo, which I'll do sometimes, or I can go to my room and paint or write.
So you work in your room?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of medium do you use?
Oil, mostly, yeah. And I'm an easel painter, which took me a long time to get to that. For a long time, I was just a destructive, insane, giant, like abstract painter, and I just destroyed the apartment I learned how to paint in.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I need to be an easel painter.
I had a couple of friends like that in college, and they would make fun of me because my studio was so pristine, clean.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, they don't pay you for the paint on the floor and the walls. They pay you for the paint on the canvas.
Yeah. When I first started it, and I don't feel like this anymore because I'm learning how to actually paint. But when I first started, I've always been an incredibly messy person, and I'm trying to work on that. But it was so gratifying to find abstract painting, because I started with abstracts and then I stopped doing abstracts because it just felt like, oh, I can just be messy, but some of the mess gets on the canvas and it's cool. And then I can take it out of my apartment and put it somewhere else, and it's like my disaster that is my apartment is now like welcomed into someone else's home, and that was a really gratifying thing.
Yeah, it's gratifying when somebody else appreciates your work.
Yeah.
So, are you specializing in any particular subjects? Like, do you go out and paint in the woods out back, or do you?
I do a lot of flowers. Yeah. I'm Van Gogh.
Yeah. The lilies of the field, sunflowers.
Yeah, I just bought some tulips that are in my room right now, and I've decided I'm gonna, because I was staring at my room last night and I was like, I like being here. It's very quiet, and that's unusual, and I'm feeling kind of melancholy about that, and I don't have anything to look at because my room's really bare. So I went out and I bought some tulips, and I've been staring at them.
Wait a minute, two of my paintings are in your room.
Well, yeah, but they're behind my head when I'm sitting in bed. Yeah. So I got some tulips, and I'm looking at them now.
So, how are we doing on time? 22. Okay, well, let's take some questions from the audience and see if we have any comments or questions.
Tom, how do you find that your Zen practice is impacting your art?
Well, it's hard to say because I just started with the Zen practice. But it's already given me a little more order to my schedule, which is honestly the biggest thing for me, because I've never had a problem when it comes to when I'm in front of the canvas, but I have a problem getting there, So that's been helpful. That's the main thing. And it's since I've been here for 3 or 4 days now, but every day I've had a little more order than the day before. Yeah.
Well, let me flip it the other way. How is your art impacting your Zen practice?
Oh, that is an interesting question, and it's helping. Before I was a painter, I was a musician, and before I was a musician, I tried poetry, and I never let go of either of those things. And I find that when I'm sitting, if I can't just let the mind, I try to just let the thoughts go, but sometimes you get stuck somewhere you don't want to be. And you're just like, I have a song stuck in my head and I don't want that. But I find that I can just find like a little poem I haven't written yet, and I can just live in there and just like let the lines of the poem just come up and down. And then when I'm done, I have something to write down. So I've been able to find poetic space to sort of live in while I meditate. And it's made it so that I haven't even once for a minute wanted a meditation session to be over. I've never thought about what time it is, because if I even start to get bored, I'm like, okay, I'll just go to this place that I know I'll have fun in.
Well, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I can't tell anybody this, but now I'm telling everybody this.
Oh, I do. I'm an amateur composer. I do music compositions around the Zen liturgy primarily recently. And sometimes I find those running through my head when I'm sitting. And since they're about Zen, I don't think that's much of a contradiction. But it's interesting what you said about you go to that space and you find yourself going through the poetry and then you have something to write down.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit more about that. That seems like most poets seem to like keep the pencil going.
Because I don't know. I think I write poetry like it reminds me of the way that Van I've been thinking about Van Morrison, so I'm just going to assume that it reminds me of Van Morrison, I guess.
Mhm.
But because I don't sit and just try to compose all of the lines in order in my head. I just find a couple phrases that I'm just happy to have bouncing around over and over and over again. So it's like I'm finding a poetic space to live in. Is how it feels. Like I find like 5 lines, and then I'll just be like, okay, I can just let these just come in and out and in and out, and I don't care what order they go in. I don't. And then when I'm done, I just like try to get back into that space and just it really feels like engraving what's in my head. And then I'm just like, okay, now I can walk away. I got into that space, I put it down, and now I walk away. So my poems, they don't feel composed. They feel like sketches.
Mhm.
Of,
So are they musical? Do they have melody accompanying in your mind, or just?
I think that I could sing them if somebody else was giving me the music, but they're not necessarily musical.
So you don't hear them that way.
No.
You hear them monotone.
Well, they're expressive.
Mhm.
Because I'm an emotional person. They're emotional. I go through their whole range of emotions
Mhm.
when I'm doing it.
But not necessarily musical in the sense
Not
of
necessarily
pitches.
musical, no.
How about from you over there?
I just enjoying listening to your to telling us who you are, because we're just getting to know you. That's very cool.
It's funny. My memory is so terrible, and I'll forget everything I said to you guys by the time we're done talking. So
It's recorded. So.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Tom, do you know Brad Warner?
No.
Heard of Brad Warner? He's come and spoken with us a couple of times here. But Brad Warner was a punk rock musician earlier in his career, and his first book, especially, the name of which is escaping me, but it deals with his sort of transition from punk rock to, well, then helping make Godzilla movies, and then to Zen. But it might be an interesting read for you.
What's the name of that book?
It's Brad Warner. He's written a number of them, and I'm blanking on the name of this one.
One is something wrapped in chocolate.
That was a more recent one about.
Was his a Zen failure in Japan? Did he write that one?
No, that was a different one.
That was David Chadwick.
Yeah. I don't know. People who are watching this now are going, "Here's the name of it. Here's the name of it. What's wrong with you?" And I cannot remember. But Brad Warner, I'll get it for you.
I would appreciate that. And I would forget the name, but like we said, it's being recorded, and you're gonna get it for me, so it's okay.
In my case, most of it's not worth remembering anyway.
Yeah. I was hoping when I got here, I was like, maybe Zen will help my memory. Now I'm not. I don't think it will.
I do memorization. I encourage people to do memorization. I think if you took some of the liturgy, for instance, from the chant book, some of them are very brief, but they're very poetic. And if you memorized a few of those, I think you'd find you'd start kickstarting your memory. At least I have. I've found that really works for me. In school, we used to memorize a lot of things, but I don't think people do that much anymore. And I think it's a part of your mind or your brain that has been lost.
Yeah, I like to memorize things. I just feel like as soon as I start talking, I just get so excited. Like I'm a really manic thinker and conversationalist. And when I get that excited, I just get so easily distracted, and it's like it's like my memories are just not forming. Is how it feels. So I lose all the conversations I ever have.
You say in order to learn something new, it has to connect to something you already know, some patterning way. So they did a study at Yale University where they had an audience in an auditorium listen to a lecture by a professor, and they played music, and I'm pretty sure it was Mozart. I think they said it was Mozart. It was very, very patterned, elegantly patterned. And in one case, they had the audience listen to the music, focus on the music. In the other case, they had them listen to the lecture, I think. And so those in the group that listened to the music in the background had much significantly better recall. And the theory is that because the music is so patterned, it was sort of implanting the information in your mind, you know, with kind of a structure associated with it. So I'm not sure not really remembering much is a bad thing, but I think there are techniques and ways to figure out if you really want to remember something, there are ways to do it.
Yeah, I think that my poor memory has made me a better artist, because that's like I've had to learn how to just be incredibly intuitive all the time, because there's no way I'm going to ever do anything reasoned, because I don't know what's going on all the time, because my memory is just so shot. So I am a really intuitive person.
If you know, I see a lot of artists who feel compelled to develop a style, which basically means they're conforming to something that they have done. So in a sense, it's a form of memory. It's a form of let's not get too far out of balance with what I've already done. You know, next thing. And I heard that in school at the Institute of Design where I study. It was like artists develop a style. At first they're what's called derivative, or imitating others, like imitating Van Gogh. But then at some point you want to leapfrog, you know, into your own thing. But most people, it seemed to me, were misinterpreting that idea as that each of the paintings I do has to be consistent from painting to painting to painting. I have to have a style that is my own, it's distinct, and nobody else looks like this, right? And so what happens is then so what? All your paintings look the same. So what does it matter that nobody else looks like this? You look like yourself.
Yeah, that reminds me of Matisse, who basically, at some point, I think he said, you know, that he tries to approach every painting as if he doesn't know how to paint. You know, and it's like,
Forgotten.
You know, and he's, you know, he's my favorite painter, so it's a good attitude to have.
It was Miro, I think, at the end of his life had this big burst of different color.
Two things. That Miro comment is very beginner's mind, which is interesting. And then also the name of the Brad Warner's first book was Sit Down and Shut Up.
That's right. I remember I saw that y'all had that in this building. I think
in the library, yeah.
I think when I first came here, like 10 years ago, maybe.
And then the subtitle is Punk Rock Commentaries on Buddha, God, Truth, Sex, Death, a Dogen's Treasury of the Right Dharma Eye.
That's why I asked, because I was like, maybe he did that book, but I didn't want to ask because I didn't want to say the name of that book, and then you guys be like, no, that was this other incredibly famous guy, and now you just sound like somebody who does nothing.
You don't have to worry about that with us. We've made all the mistakes.
Hey, but I don't know about that.
So is there anything we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about tonight?
I'm sure there is, but I don't know what it is.
Tell me about your music. What did you do in terms of music? What made you stop if you'd have stopped?
I started playing music when I was 20, and I read a book about a lot of the punk bands in the 80s. It was called Our Band Could Be Your Life, and I really liked it. And the message I got from it was, well, if you just play the guitar loud enough and yell loud enough, something worthwhile will happen. And so I was
long enough.
Yeah. So I was like, I can do that. I can just scream and play the guitar, and that's what I did. And I found that it was a really good vehicle for the poetry I had been trying to write before that, because whenever I tried to write poetry, I would always be mortified when somebody else would read it out loud, because I'd be like, that's not the voice. It's my voice, and you guys are doing it wrong. But with singing, it's like, yeah, you guys can't. I'm singing. You know, it's because art has always felt like I've had problems with trying to control my life. You know, like, and art has always been like, well, I can control my art. You know, I have some control in that realm, and it helps me like go a bit everywhere else. So with music, I felt like I had all this control. And I didn't really stop. Once I found painting, I just realized I was better at that. And music is logistically difficult to do if you're not like a Bob Dylan who could just sit down and make beautiful music on your own. Like that's pretty rare, really, just to be able to sit down with an acoustic guitar and do something that is really worthwhile. So I needed bands, and scheduling was hard, and it was just easier. Just painting was just something where I could just be as completely dysfunctional as I am at my worst and still just accomplish something.
You keep a sketchbook,
Yeah, I keep sketchbooks.
like a journal?
Yeah, and it's crazy. I don't like to show it to people because it's, like.
What makes you feel that way?
Because I'll sketch something that if I don't like it, I'll just start writing insane things about, it's just because I'm in my sketchbook, I'm like, I can do anything. Nobody can.
Private.
Yeah, it's nobody can say, oh, this is crazy. And it depends, because some sketchbooks I've done whole sketchbooks knowing that I would give them away or show them to somebody, and then those sketchbooks were not scary to read. They were just lovely.
Did you ever go back and look at sketchbook you did years ago?
Well, I've only been doing it for a couple of years, but no, I don't. I don't like to look at my own thing. When I do, I'm always mystified.
That's one thing they say about journaling. If you go back and look, it's like you start to hear what this person is saying.
Yeah. I'm
as
like
a reader, and they're not you.
Yeah, I'm like, who is this person? I'm like, sometimes I look at my old drawings and I'm like, I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make me feel any more humble.
So how long have you had this obsession with Van Gogh?
Since I remember, I first found out about Van Gogh when I was 23 or 24. I was dating a girl who had one of the sunflowers on her wall. And I just looked at it all the time. And I remember asking her about it one time because I thought it was cool that the base of the sunflower, like the vase or pot or whatever, it had like cracks in the paint. And I was like, oh, it's neat how the paint cracked like over time. And she was like, the paint didn't crack. He did that on purpose. And I was like, what? That's crazy. And then I asked her about him, and she was like, Van Gogh is just this sad guy who painted flowers because it made him happy to look at flowers. And I was like, I want to paint flowers. Like, I would be happy to look at flowers I'd painted. And then when I found painting, I did abstracts for a while. And the whole time I was painting, I was like, I wish I could paint flowers, but I can't because I'm too old. I just know how to do abstracts. And then I said that to somebody, and they said, just paint some flowers. And I did. And then it just reinvigorated. I was like, I can do this now too. And it just reinvigorated my whole love for Van Gogh. And then I obsessed about him because the more I read about him, the more I identified with him. Because my sort of theory on his mental illness was that I think it all sort of stems from when he was 11 years old. He had a difficult experience at a boarding school in a town called Zevenbergen, and it left him just ruined. And everybody said before that he was a child, and after that he was an old man. And I had a really traumatic experience in my public education, and that's what everybody said about me. And then after that, I just always had a more difficult time, and it just changed the way my brain works. And I think it did it in a similar way.
There's an expression, Master Dogen, is very powerful expression that was very important to him. They call it I can't remember what it is in Japanese, but the absolute exertion of a thing. The absolute exertion of a thing. Like anything is manifesting itself. And so when I look at Van Gogh painting flowers or whatever, it looks like that's what he's capturing. It's just this vivid reality of this thing, the flower, whatever it is. I don't read into it in a like romantic connotations or anything like that. It's just he's giving you this impression. He was called an impressionist, but giving you this impression of his vision, of his reality that he's seeing, and he captured it in a paint in such a way that if you looked at the actual room that he painted or the actual flower, you probably wouldn't see that.
I feel the same. I feel like when I look at Van Gogh's paintings, I get the impression that he's looking at something and then he's saying, I don't want that thing to go away, so I'm going to put it in paint. And then
immortalize it.
Yeah, because then the thing he saw never goes away, and he gets to keep it forever.
Yeah. And then Zen expression, you have poets, you have painters. And it seems to me that they're doing the magic of Chinese and Japanese painting is that it captures this ineffable kind of reality of the landscape with the mountains and the fog and everything. And it's almost like you're looking at an actual picture of it, not necessarily photograph, but it has this vivid reality to it. And I think Van Gogh, his work was like that. The other impressionists, even Gauguin. If you look at Gauguin,
Oh, I love
even
Gauguin.
it's very blocky, and somehow they're not doing the technical thing of doing the contour, the drawing, in the technically correct way, but they're using the paint as this sort of magical medium. You know, it's almost as if it's more about the paint than it is about the subject, because they're using the paint to create this image, which is today we'd look at it and we say, well, it's pixelated, or something like that. And if you refine the resolution, it would turn into this photograph of these things. But it's this beautiful sort of expression of what this still life really is like.
I love going looking at my own favorite paintings that I've done and then looking real close, and it doesn't make any sense. You're just like, I don't even know how I did that. I'm like, how did I decide that these insane splotches of paint were going to look like something?
Would add up to that.
But they do.
When you walk up to the lily ponds, it's like they turn into the most beautiful abstract paintings, because you're right up against them. And then you have to back up about 20, 30 feet before they come back together.
Yeah, I always say that to my friends because some of my friends miss my abstract paintings. And I'm like, well, then just get closer to my still lifes and you'll see them.
Take a little blow up,
Yeah.
enlargement of detail. Well, wonderful. So, closing words, what would you have to say to people your age if they're thinking about Zen, their creative life, etc.? What would you suggest to people that they think about?
Well, you'll have to come back to me on the Zen issue because I'm just starting out. But as for creative life goes, I think that the reason that I was able to learn how to paint quickly is because I watched a video of Picasso and I was amazed by how fast he painted. And I said, you know what, I'm not going to ever paint slow. I'm just going to start like that. And just the confidence of that just makes you a better painter. And then recently I decided I'm going to learn how to paint with my left hand. And I'm going to learn how to write with my left hand.
Da Vinci.
And I picked up the brush and at first I just tried writing and it was like shaky and it looked bad. And then I said, no, I'm going to do what I did with my right hand. I'm just going to write as fast as I can. And it looked good. And it was just as good as my right hand handwriting. And then I did a little drawing and it was just as good as a drawing I do with my right hand. And it was because I was going fast and I was holding the brush from the edge. I wasn't trying to do anything fine. I just wanted to see what would happen, and I was moving quickly.
So the speed is too quick for your mind to second guess and interfere.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, the abstract expressionism was like that. Franz Klein, a bunch of
when you watch Pollock paint, he's just running around, just
right. So I think they wanted to move so fast that they couldn't inhibit themselves.
Mm-hmm. And de Kooning would use these 10-foot long paintbrushes because he wanted to remove his hand's dexterity completely. So it's just the brush is doing the work. He doesn't have any say because he's holding it from the end and just letting whatever happens happen.
Right. Well, I think there's a kind of a meme or a trend in art and in music. All kinds of art, performance arts and so on, about getting the self out of the way, getting me out of it, and let the art happen, let the medium come out, let the reality come out. So I think these kinds of tricks we play really move fast. We had I had a painting teacher who told us about some of the history of modern painters, and they would walk by their painting real fast and look at it, or they would stand upside down. They'd look at it upside down. There was one painter who stood on one foot so much that foot grew much bigger than his other foot. He had to buy 2 pairs of shoes, 2 different sizes. So there's a lot of interesting history around artists and how they lived and how they dealt with this problem. Everybody has the same problem, right?
Yeah. I always said that when I was a musician, I would say just to my friends who were trying to learn how to play music, I would say just listen to the song you're playing. That's all you need to do.
Yeah. My brother is a jazz musician. He said, listen to the sound your music you're making. He said, if you don't listen, nobody else will.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, because even with painting, like at first people didn't, I wasn't good at first, obviously, but I saw something good, and so I was like, I'm gonna bring that out, and everybody was like, you're just literally ruining your roommate's apartment, like, and your own, and you're acting like a crazy person. But I was like, no, I see something. Like, I know you guys don't because you're not looking hard enough, but I am.
Don't ruin our room. Okay?
No, I won't. Well,
I learned
how to do the easel painting. Yeah.
We have a deck out back.
Okay.
You can paint on the deck.
Yeah.
So I think that's it from here for now. Are we doing fine on time? So please join us again next Thursday. We will cancel once in a while from Thursday to Thursday, but these will be available for you to watch on the YouTube, on our Facebook page.
And
Facebook page, as well as I think the audio is on Mixler.
Not
No, the audio from tonight is not on Mixler. So with that, thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, me too.
We'll see you next time.
Okay.